Hey guys, welcome back to Starcastic Remarks. Alongside my guest here today, Juraj Kralik. My name is Ryan Chambers. Thank you to our sponsors, BetterHelp, Manscaped, and DraftKings Sportsbook. Use that promo code THPN the next time you are there using their services. That's the best way to help us grow and lets them know that we are the ones that sent you. Juraj, we talked a little bit right before the recording here. It has been way too long, man. I did not want it to be this long before you came back on the show, but uh, I'm so excited to be able to get to talk to you, and I really appreciate you making some time for little old Starcastic Remarks here today.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Ryan, for having me. And it's my fault, to be honest. I know you've messaged me a couple of times, but there's this time difference that we need to manage, so it's not that easy. But yeah, I'm happy we can have it go right now.
Yeah, and for those that don't know, Uri is actually he lives in Slovakia, so the time difference between here in the United States and there in Slovakia over in Europe is quite dramatic. So again, it makes it interesting because it's in the afternoon over there for him, and it's 8 o'clock in the morning at the time we're recording this for here in the States, here in Texas. So again, though, still, man, I really appreciate you coming on here on the show. Wanted to get a couple of just your takes on the Stars off season, and we'll probably talk about the Stanley Cup final a little bit. And this is the time to be a hockey fan right now. The Stanley Cup final just ended. We've got the award show coming up. We've got free agency coming up. We've got the draft. Just everything seems to be happening all at once. So the first question I wanted to ask you about is not necessarily like a big one. It's just about like the scheduling of how the NHL did it this year, because there's been a lot of talk about it.
Yeah.
And specifically with like the Stanley Cup final, and between the conference final and the Stanley Cup final, there was the 5 days, which that didn't make a whole lot of sense to me. And then they added an extra travel day between Edmonton and the Florida series. So if there was extra travel going, there was 2 days in between those games. And I just felt like that it could have gone a lot better. And I felt like the NHL lost some of their momentum despite the high TV ratings that they had for their Game 7 for the Stanley Cup final. So I just want to get your take on that, what you think about the scheduling of how all of that happened in the playoffs.
Starting with the big one, I see. My view on this is I would say pretty straightforward. I just saw image that Detroit Red Wings will have 9 preseason games in September. So why? It's my question. Like, why can't we have 3, max 4 preseason games? Like, have this sort of a ceiling for every team. Let's start the season on October the 1st, and let's finish by handing up the cup on June 15th at most. Then you have 2 full weeks until the draft and free agency, and maybe split the draft and then free agency into this bigger scale. Because I know Stars scouts are already now in Vegas. I saw some pictures that they are grouping in Bellagio as we speak. And I don't know, maybe they will stay there because draft is in 2 days, the free agency is in 5 days. So if the temperature won't hound them away from Vegas, I think they can just stay there because yeah, it's been prolonged. It's been dragged throughout, and I don't have a problem with the 5-day break between the conference finals and Stanley Cup finals, much more than the preseason actually existing and maybe existing on that level. Having 8 or 9 preseason games is just way too much. You have 82. You have freaking 82 regular season games to get through then. So imagine you are Detroit Red Wings and you have 91 games just combining postseason and regular season, and then possibly you can have another 20 in playoffs. So that's 111 games if my math is correct in what, maybe 250 days, I don't know. So that's totally crazy. And the way to cut it is basically to cut the preseason short, maybe start sooner, I don't know, but then it would cut to the players holidays and summertime, so I wouldn't do that much. Honestly, we don't need 9 preseason games or even 6. We need just 3 or 4, and then we can have this, I would say, better rigid schedule that we can all prepare for, fans and media and players and management too. But to be honest, from a selfish perspective, right now it's June 26th, and I would say crazy 7 days are ahead of us. So everything is gonna be happening. Expect buyouts, expect trades, expect like very interesting stuff going on. So from a fan perspective, I don't mind it right now, to be honest.
Well, the reason why I ask is because I think a lot of GMs kind of held off on some of their ideas and some of the moves they wanted to do because of the pressure from Gary Bettman to not, overshadow the Stanley Cup final. And then finally they were just like, you know what, screw it. And we got like the PLD trade, we got the with Darcy Kemper, we finally got where Linus Olmark is going to be there. I mean, there were some big trades that came out, and then even some big news with like the Coyotes, for example. And like all of that was overshadowing the Stanley Cup final. Now, thank goodness the Stanley Cup final was such a great series and it was fun to watch. And there are so many storylines coming out of it. So it didn't get overshadowed, but it could have been. So that's why I was a little bit frustrated and a little bit sad about that. And then plus, I am excited for this week. This week is going to be extremely exciting. But if you had, and I don't think you need to expand it to like 3 weeks. I think that would be a little extreme. But if you had that one extra week to kind of build up some hype to some of these trades and the draft and the free agency process, and that could give you some time to make the NHL more relevant for longer. So and that's why I kind of like your idea of starting the schedule sooner and starting it like October 1st rather than what was it, October 15th or something like that. One of the reasons why they actually do that, and I didn't know this, is just because of it's mostly because of ESPN. ESPN at the end of October is covering the World Series, and they don't want to overshadow the World Series and the start of the NHL season, and they don't want those two things to overlap. So I understand that from their perspective, but from the NHL perspective, if you start a little sooner, give yourself a little bit more hype that builds up the intensity, and then after free agency, then it can go away and die down for a little while before it starts ramping back up in September. I just think that's really important, building a product and building excitement in your product as the National Hockey League.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like, I mean, what do we expect? Do we expect NHL to do the right thing here? Honestly, like the saying, the saying, best sport, worst league applies here. Like, honestly, we can go on and on about how NHL mishandles things from. Don't get me started, right? So that there are so many things that they could improve. I mean, the league itself has lost its footing. I mean, what was it like 30 years ago? It was like NHL is hot and NBA is not. You know, the cover that was on magazine, maybe Sports Illustrated.
Sports Illustrated.
Yeah, exactly. Like what happened, man? Look at the values of the franchises; they are skyrocketing. So something is doing good, but then we have like this flat cap situation. And honestly, it was a mess, not to mention the Arizona situation. All of this, I can name you 20 things if you want that NHL has done totally wrong and could have done better. We're just using common sense, but let's focus on stars then, shall we?
I agree. Okay, so what I want to ask you about first, and obviously we're getting to it here on Friday with the first round, and then Saturday with rounds 2 through 7 with the NHL draft. I know neither one of us are huge like draft nerds, but I always feel better getting other people's perspective on what the Stars could do with this pick, because this pick is the exact same pick as Jake Ottinger, and we saw what Jake Ottinger has done for this franchise. So
no, but yeah, I know what you mean.
Yeah, okay. So we traded up. We traded to get the pick. Yeah, you know what I mean.
Exactly.
But like, so 29th overall is what we have in the first round. I don't think we have a second or third, and I think we have a fourth, if I remember correctly, right?
I think Dallas only have first, fifth, and seventh.
First, fifth,
in
and
this
seventh.
year. They got recently fourth, but it's next year. I mean, in the trade for Tidal Andrea. That's what I mentioned during my last appearance on Locked On Stars, that there are a few ways of how they can actually handle the situation, because Since they don't have much picks, that many picks, I mean, they can trade down to get more for sure. Maybe they can wrap the pick, the 29 it is, into some sort of bigger trade to actually get something. But I think with how Jim Neal actually works, since he hasn't given up this pick in March on trade deadline, I think they are eager to use it because he respects his draft. I would say this scouting team way too much, and as he should, because they're the one that brought the success recently to Stars team, and they just don't want to sit there picking in 5th and 7th round. I mean, that's not fun. And that you can, I think you can get some good talent at 29, to be quite honest, and even at 35 or 36 if you decide to trade down and maybe offload some contracts during the process. So there are many ways on how the draft can actually be exciting for Stars fans, even though like Dallas is not picking until the late first round, but that's totally fine because that's deservedly so, given how they finished their regular and playoffs season. So I'm totally fine with it, and I'm actually looking forward on who they can pick because draft is. I'm not a draft guy, as you said. I leave that to others, namely Derek Normeyer or even David Castillo has been doing this very good previews on his Substack. So I think it's gonna be exciting either way, and not only because of that. I mean, to touch on the previous topic, the buyout window actually cannot open according to CBA until 48 hours until the Stanley Cup is awarded. So basically, the postponement of Stanley Cup award, it was June 24, made it that the buyout window can only start tomorrow and it only be active for like 3 days. So like that's extremely short, and and teams also have to prepare for that. And when you count that you have draft in a process as well during that same time period, I'm saying like it could make some of the fascinating deals. Like honestly, I'm looking forward to it.
And it's interesting that you talk about the buyout window too, because there's a lot of things that we'll get into here and a little bit about that that you yourself have talked about, and you make a lot of good points with it too. I honestly don't know what Jim Nill is going to do, and I mean, when do we ever know what Jim Nill is going to do? He's very good about keeping his cards close to his chest, but as far as some targets that the Stars could possibly pick with that first round pick, what are maybe some names that you've just heard from maybe Derek or from David or something like that? Because and I'll let you have the floor with that. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, Derek made really good, I would say, rankings based on tiers. So you can really see, you can go on his Twitter profile and see. I mean, David was focusing on the Stars should draft these right-handed D because of such and such reasons. I'm not personally a believer. Like, do we really need to draft right-handed defensemen? They have some I would say in the pipeline, not much. That's honest. That's like true. But if there are any fallers from the tier from 1 to 6, namely possibly I'm looking at players like Adam Jiricek, possibly Dominik Badinka. Like those two are both right-handed defensemen. Possibly Harrison Brunicki from Kamloops. He is maybe he is a long shot, but if he falls down, that could be a player that Dallas actually takes, or maybe it will be some sort of a forward like Ryder Ritchie or maybe Marek Vanacker, or how do you pronounce his name? So there are these players, these types of players that actually can be available and possibly will be. That's true. I'm just not sure if the Stars aren't going to trade down or something like so. For that point, I think we still will need to wait until the draft to actually see who is falling. I mean, it was 2 years ago when I saw like how Joachim Kemel was falling down and falling down. He was like surefire top 10 pick, and then there he was available at 17, one pick before the Stars were picking. So I was watching the draft actually because it was kind of a huge draft for Slovakia because we had like number 1, number 2. So I mean, whole country was watching the draft like for the first time maybe ever. And like that was the point. Like, okay, maybe they should trade up, honestly, like to get hands of Joachim Kemel. They didn't, because probably Nashville wanted him, didn't want to trade the pick away. But that's also one thing that can happen. Like if somebody is falling down, is there at 26, 27, Stars can actually move up even. Like it sounds like counterintuitive. Like, yeah, you have 3 picks, but you can still move up in a draft because you just received extra fourth rounder for the next year. You can do pretty much what you want. That's what makes the draft actually exciting. So yeah, it's gonna be fun.
So I really like Merrick Vanaker. That's one guy that I have actually been paying attention to quite a bit, and gets me a little bit excited. The other one that I really noticed was Julius Miettinen, and I don't think I'm saying his name right, but obviously Antti Miettinen back in the day, he was one of my favorite players when I was much younger, and so there's that nostalgia with that last name, but he's still a really interesting guy, and he's been all over draft boards as high as number 18. I think I've seen as low as 50. So this could be a guy that could be high risk, high reward for the Stars that he could go after. So he's more of like a how do I say it? More like a power forward. He's more of like the Jamie Benn type. He's big. He's like 6'3", 205, 200, something like that. And then with Merrick Vanaker, he's had some injury history even in his young career, so that might be a reason why the Stars could get him with a lower pick, and he still got a lot of that talent that they could be looking for. But let me ask you this about like draft philosophy, because this is something that's talked about a lot with me and my brothers. One of the things that I don't understand is drafting by need, right? So like if like for example, let's just say we're I don't know what let's just say we're at the draft with Juraj Slafkovsky, obviously, and with like that whole draft, okay? And let's say that the Stars had the first round pick, like the first overall pick, and but they don't need a forward. What they need is they need a defenseman. So they go after one of the top defensemen, even though Juraj Slafkovsky is right there and arguably was the best pick to make. What I don't understand is drafting by need over just taking the best player available. Because even with that asset, even if you have like a slew full of forwards and you don't have many defensemen, you can still have, and now I know it's not a guarantee, but you can still use those assets to go out and trade for a defenseman that you need. And then on top of that, you have that really good player. So then you can trade your really good forward prospect for a really good defensive prospect that was lower on the board, even though this forward prospect was higher on the board. So let me ask you about that and like see what draft philosophy you would rather go with. Just best player available or just draft by need. Where
Yeah,
do you stand?
that actually depends, because I would counter your point. When you're drafting at from 1 to maybe 6, 7, depends on the talent crop that year. Yeah, you definitely draft for need, because those are the game changers that you actually need. And if you have a hole in a system that needs to be addressed, definitely. I mean, that's the reason why Stars drafted Miro Heiskanen, after all, because they had a hole at the left defense. They had Klingberg, they had Honka, they had Steven Jones on the right. So the chances were they're going to take Heiskanen over Makar, even though in reality, maybe in hindsight, you would take Makar over Heiskanen. That's my point when pointing and discussing this drafting for need. When you draft at 30, that's really not a good place to draft for need. When it comes to, let's just use your example. I mean, I'm honestly not sure if the Stars would draft, let's say, Slafkovsky over Nemeth. You see, because Slafkovsky is a power left winger, which Stars, they have Robertson at left wing, they have Jamie Benn, but after that, not much. So and Shimon Nemeth is basically right-hander puck-moving defenseman. So honestly, they need both.
Mm-hmm.
I would go for Shimon Nemeth, like personally, because I was honestly not surprised when Shimonez went 1 second. He could like emerge as the best player of that draft, even surpassing Slavkovsky with the hockey IQ that he has. And Stars are pretty big on hockey IQ, so expect them to take somebody who is maybe not the biggest, not the heaviest player, but maybe player who can actually make some hockey plays, has this really hockey IQ, and can actually elevate his game when the I would say his teammates are elevated as well. Look no further than Marek Borg, for example. He was taken, I think it was 30 overall, and he has like this, I would say, almost perfect hockey IQ. And it was seen, it was visible how he was struggling at first in the AHL. Once he got better teammates, his play actually elevated. Once he got Logan Stankoven on his line, he totally, I would say, skyrocketed into AHL MVP. And I totally expect him to do the same thing that Logan did later this season in next year. And that was also probably the reason why the Stars traded away Ty Dellandrea, although I personally don't agree with the move. I didn't like it at all. We can go into that. But there are these kind of players that can actually carve themselves out in 3, 4, maybe 5 years with their hockey IQ, because there was this saying, you can't teach size. Yeah, but you don't really need to, do you? Uh,
No, you
there are
don't.
there are small effective players that can actually decide game sevens. Look at Sam Reinhart. Look at Wyatt Johnston. Look at other players that did so and will continue to do so. So the size right now, the size is actually pretty much on the verge, because there are so many like huge but still talented guys who can stick handle. I would One of the good examples is Simon Edvinsson in Detroit as well. Like he's so
Mhm.
huge, he's
Yeah.
6'8" or something, but he can stick handle like nobody else. So like this is where I would say not the market, but this is where actually the surplus of the players actually are going down and going up actually, and the size actually meets the talent as well, and that's where the things actually go scary. So yeah, but definitely I would not even go for best player available, but I would definitely go for the best hockey IQ available at maybe 29 or something.
Okay, that's interesting. Okay, um, and then to your point, I think the Stars have learned a little bit about size as of late, because when they drafted Riley Tufte back in 2017, Riley Tufte could do all of that stuff. He had the size, he had the ability to skate, he had all of that all of that offensive acumen. That and a lot of people kind of, at least now, if you look at like Tage Thompson, that's probably who they were probably looking at him becoming, something like that, a big guy who can seem to do it all. Um, and he didn't exactly turn out the way that the Stars wanted him to. So then we see what they did this 2 years ago, 3 years ago now, with Wyatt Johnston. First off, he's not the biggest guy in the world. He's only 6 foot, which that's crazy because I'm only 5'6", but whatever. And then with their second pick, they take Logan Stankoven, and he's not 5'9". I think he's 5'8". So I think they learned that after watching players like DeBrincat and Caulfield, and if to go back even further, if you want to talk like Martin St. Louis, like those kind of players can still be effective. Yeah, they might have to work a little bit harder, and we saw this year that Logan Stankoven has that ability to work harder. Like we were watching board battles with him in the playoffs where he was going against these guys that were like 6'4", 6'5", and maybe even bigger, and he was still winning the puck battles. So it's like that can be overcome. The size can overcome. And also, to your point, like those big guys are starting to get to that point where the talent is lining up with the size, and that seems to be the direction that the NHL is going. So I agree with you on that too. And
Yeah,
what's the guy's name in Detroit again? Edvinson?
Simon Edvinsson. Yeah,
Yes,
but I
yes.
think like to reiterate your point, the guy that they probably learned on, like I mean the Stars brass, is Denis Gurianov. Honestly, like Riley Tufte was
Yeah.
picked 25, so I mean like who cares, right? But Denis Gurianov was picked 12, and there were multiple like very good players with high hockey IQ after him, like Matthew Barzal and all these players. And he was the prototype. He was skillful, he was fast, but his hockey IQ was really low. That's why he's not even in the NHL anymore. So I think, and they put a lot of trust into him making it. They didn't put that much of a trust into Riley Tufte, or for that matter. So I think they really learned like around 2017, 2018, when they saw that Denis Gurianov is not actually working out, and this philosophy needs to be changed. That's where actually I think that's just my humble opinion, but I think like seeing how this organization is doing like for the last 10 years, 15 years, or whatever, maybe in 20 years, I think he was I would say the case study of how not to draft.
All right. Well, lots of good talk there. Thank you for that. But I also want to get into some off-season stuff, and what I love that you do is you go on Cap Friendly just like I do, and you're a nerd about that stuff like I am. So like, okay, well, if I fit this player here and did this and blah blah blah, and it makes me so mad. Stupid Caps, like they had to buy Cap Friendly, but we still have it till July 5th, so I've been using it. And one of your latest tweets was really interesting. So I kind of want to jump into it. First off, I want to give you the floor with this. You very briefly talked about it, but how did you feel about the Dellandrea trade in particular, and why did you not like it?
Yeah, I mean, I think I discussed this. Like, I hated the return, honestly, and it was nonsensical trade to make. I heard and I read the stuff that Leah at Dallas Morning News wrote, because she talked with Jim Neal, and he gave his reasoning about this trade. Like, Tide wasn't satisfied with his ice time, and like he wanted to give him like I would say better place to play, which he did. But you have like looking at this from the manager perspective, right? I happen to be one in real life, in professional life itself. So I try to apply some of this stuff when I see maybe disgruntled employee who's not really like given much of a space. But NHL is different, because I don't want to say the NHL players are like modern slaves, because they are obviously not. But Ty Dellandrea didn't really have much of a say when or where should he play, right? But
Right.
I think the main reason for Jim Neal actually letting Ty Dellandrea go was the disconnect between Dellandrea and Pete DeBoer, honestly, because Pete DeBoer was quite reluctant to play him in some meaningful games because there were better alternatives. And I genuinely saw a spot for Ty Dellandrea next season, because he's 23. He's still your first round pick for 2018. You picked him in your own building, actually. And he's this sort of a Mike Fisher type potential alternate captain. Everybody loved him. He's 23. He's RFA, so he doesn't really have much of a say where he can go or work in influence. The projected contract for him was about 1 million, maybe a bit more, but that's not really too big of a chunk of the cap that to actually chew on. So he was actually the prototype fourth line center that Stars will look for, honestly. And there were other candidates to trade away. I mean, I can imagine San Jose going after Radek Faksa for the fourth line pick. That would have made a perfect sense if the Stars get rid of Radek Faksa, for example, who was healthy scratch during the playoffs. So you don't really want to have a healthy scratch making 3.25 million euros per, like sitting on a bench. And if San Jose paid fourth round pick for him, I would say bravo, Jim Neal, to make this sort of a trade. Honestly, giving up Ty Dellandrea for this low return didn't make sense, because if you are a manager, your job is to manage people. Your job really needs to be like motivate the guy, make sure he will get the opportunity. And if not, maybe he did. Maybe I'm like blaming him for no reason. Maybe he talked with Pete DeBoer and saw, oh my God, there really won't be that much of a difference next year for Ty, which I personally disagree. But who am I, honestly? I can see the spot, let's say, on the fourth line for him, because there is still Sam Steele who isn't resigned, who will command more than Dellandrea would. And yes, there is like this. I was imagining this sort of like this really dangerous fourth line of Matthew Blumel, Ty Dellandrea, and Sam Steele. So like this really energetic line that can score, that can defend, that can play PK. Like all of this was like really going into like this fine picture, and then they traded Delandry away instead of a guy like Faxa. So that left me flabbergasted. But honestly, it might be connected to the negotiations with Chris Tanev as well. Like, I don't know if we can jump to this topic, but I heard Chris Tanev is asking for term. He's asking for 4-year deal, which I would personally give him, even though we know that the year 3, possibly 4, could be a bit tricky. But the Stars have a blueprint with that, with Ryan Suter. So I can see the Stars actually giving in and giving Kristanov the 4 deal, because I know Toronto is thinking about this as well. So there are other suitors. And yeah, the Kristanov negotiation, I think, precedes all of these other negotiations. So Jim Neal has this saying he said like 2 days ago, like, I'm trying to change batteries in my in my cap calculator because the numbers just don't add up, and they don't. That's why I'm like flabbergasted you traded away like asset which was cost control in Tidal Andrea. Like that doesn't make sense to me, but I digress.
Well, a lot of good points. I like what you said about Delandria. I understood why he did it, but I didn't like it at the same time as well. And mostly more from a personal standpoint than like a cap standpoint. I really love the player. He was a Swiss Army knife. You could pretty much plug him into any of the bottom 3 lines, and he seemed to do really well. Not so much this year as last year, but he still had a good year this year. I felt like for the role he was being asked to play. For Chris Tanev, and I'm glad you brought this up because this was going to be another big topic that I completely agree with you on. I think this has to take priority. You cannot let Chris Tanev go to the open market if you can avoid it. And something I just talked about with Joey from Locked On Stars, and then also with my brothers, is like I know it's crazy. I know it seems crazy, but if he's asking for 3 or 4 years, I think you give it to him. And even at like, I would even be willing to give up to $6 million to keep him on the team. And I know you, especially you, I knew I was going to get that reaction from you because of the cap hit there. But when you look at, and everyone else saw it in the playoffs, that's why he's such a hot commodity. He completely struck down some of the best players of the best teams. And the past 2, well, not the past 2 cup winners, but before the Panthers, the past 2 cup winners, when he shut down Mark Stone and Jonathan Marchessault for a good chunk of that series. And he did even better in the series against Colorado, where he shut down Nathan MacKinnon and Mikko Rantanen, almost made them a non-factor. And then even in the Edmonton series, even though we lost it, there were points early on in the series, especially in the first 3 games, that he was doing his job while he was injured, and completely negating these guys' offensive abilities. And he played so much top minutes against these top guys. And for me, is like, as much as I love Matt Duchene and as much as I love Ty Dellandrea and some of these other guys that need contracts, that is a player that you cannot replace. And you might be able to replace him, with someone who we'll talk about here in a second, but you saw how well he fit in with the Stars and the amount of minutes that he played and how much of an impact that he had on this team. And I know I understand the age, I understand the injury aspect with him in years past, but just this is not a player I feel like you can let go. And if he's asking for 6 million, then you give it to him. If he's asking for 4 years, you give it to him. Now, I'm not saying you should give him outrageous amount of money like Miller Heiskanen level, like 8 million for 5 years or something like that. But I would be willing to do that. 4 years at $6 million. I know that sounds crazy. I know that's kind of outside of the box, but that's just how strongly I feel about Chris Tanev staying with the Stars.
Yeah, I mean, that's where I disagree, honestly. Like, I know Chris Tanev fits like a glove to this team. he was like, I can argue he was their MVP for the first 2 rounds in playoffs, honestly. But when you consider like market comparables, projections, and all that stuff, I think at 6 million, yeah, I see your point. I think like I'm not reporting on this. I can maybe assume and maybe like guess, possibly is the better word, that the TANF camp is asking, I think, something around 5 million and 4 years. So basically, TJ Brody deal that he got in Toronto, because that's 20 million. That's nice money, and 4 years is a nice cushion on term as well. 5 million is, or maybe 5.5 is the most I could go. But honestly, if you really need to like make this move, I get it. It would be overpay. I totally understand, but then again, go for it, right? It does, and it could have implications on your team as well. Not so much later on when the cap goes up, but this year, because honestly, when I did the projections that you mentioned, I saw them at maybe $400 of cap space left when all was said and done. So every cent will matter this offseason. That's why I don't expect big things from Stars. I really honestly just expect smart things. Signing Chris Tanev 6 million for 4 years is not smart in my view, but I can see why they would be desperate to make it, because like he's so important, and he was so important. And we are looking right now at the, I would say, Jason Robertson window, when Jason Robertson will be pretty cheap for the next 2 years, given his production. Rope Hintz, Wyatt Johnston, even like he will still be on the ALC, so maybe go for it for this year, yeah. And because next year there will be like these big contracts of Jamie Benn, Esa Lindell, possibly Ryan Suter going off the books, even Radek Faksa if he stays. So there will be space to accommodate like another albatross contract if Tanev doesn't project that well, even at 6 million. So I see your point, but I honestly hope they can let's just like TLDR version for the Stars fans. If the Stars sign Chris Tanev under 5 million and at 3 year term, then that's a great deal. Then it's a win deal. Anything above, we can discuss. Anything about 5 years, anything about about 4 years, because they won't go to 5 years. I'm sure of that. So we can discuss. But if the number starts at 4, and even it could end like 99999, that's a good deal.
All right. Well, there's so much I want to talk to you, but we're running out of time here. I know you got to get going. But I do want to ask you about the second half of your tweet that you had. So you really liked Robert Tiffin, who, if you don't follow him, you should follow him on X, Twitter. You really liked the idea of getting Rasmus Andersson, and he was one of the guys that I kind of talked about as well back at the trade deadline, of guys who maybe the Stars could go after. Now, in order to make it fit, you said you still have to buy out Suter. So Suter would have to get bought out. But you put up this trade of trading for Rasmus Andersson and giving up your 2024 first round pick. So it would have to be done this week. Lundqvist and Faksa in the deal to make the money work and have him come as a member of the Dallas Stars. So what do you see in Rasmus Andersson, other than the fact that he's right-handed? What do you see in his game that makes you think he would be a really good fit for the Stars?
Well, the puck moving ability, to make it short, honestly. Like if you pair him with Heiskanen, you could get this Taves Makar type of pairing, honestly, out of them. And then you could have Harley and Tanev as your second pairing, or maybe even Lindell and Tanev, and Harley with possibly Bixel or somebody else, because there is this thing that we are saying that Stars need to re-sign Chris Tanev. Yeah, they need to. But I think they need to sign, or maybe try to look for another right-handed D. So being right-handed is actually a big thing. And I think it suits well also for the Pete DeBoer type of play that he actually ensues, that this team wants to play with. So these are the types of deal when you basically kill like two birds with one stone. You trade away Radek Faksa because that's just a cap space just sitting idle like a sitting duck. and you actually make it into more effective, I would say, investment. And yeah, you probably need to give up Nils Lundqvist, but honestly, at this point, this is the same case as Tidal Andrea, honestly. So, and when you look at the work that NHL general managers are doing, you just need to follow maybe some of their last steps. And some GMs like to do business with other GMs, like maybe more than the other. Like there is this precipice that Stars already made a deal for Chris Tanev, so we know Jim Neal and Flames GM are talking. We know Jonah Hanley was claimed by Calgary. We know Riley Demiani was also is right now also a member of Calgary Flames. So there is this connection. That's why I like the idea, because it's not like just this like high level idea, but it has layers, and the layers are Calgary are rebuilding. They don't need Rasmus Andersson for the next 2 years, which he's signed for, and Stars at that cap point like 4.55, I believe. That's just the, I would say, really good allocation of money. And when you look exactly that you are projecting, this was the roster I was talking about. Like it had like $400 of cap space on the opening night, so it's gonna be pretty tight. That I'm sure of.
Yeah, and for those of you that are listening on the audio side, I've got his tweet up here on screen for those of you that are watching on YouTube. But it's a very good team, and we're running out of time, so we can't. I'll have to have you come on again sometime soon, maybe after the draft. But you've got like William Carrier on here, who's been in rumors that the Stars might be interested in. Blake Wheeler, that's another interesting one that I really like. And I think a lot of people will think that's hilarious. John Klingberg coming back at $1 million. That's just awesome. I love that.
Honestly, I just did that for the clicks.
Well, it worked. I think it worked.
No, I mean, John Klingberg, after surgery, I would be willing to bet money on that he still can be like your Nils Lundqvist replacement, honestly. Because when you give up Nils Lundqvist, you need to also replace Lundqvist with somebody. And who better than my personal favorite, John Klingberg, honestly. But no, this was just something to cheer and something to like really maybe tickle the brains of the people that follow me.
Well, I love it. That honestly, I really love that. So, well, I know you got to get going, so I don't want to hold you any longer. But Juraj, thank you so much for coming on the show and just talking Stars hockey. It's so much fun to do stuff like this. I know you've kind of taken a back seat with the writing stuff, especially on Defending Big D lately, but he's such a good follow, Stars fans. If you go and follow him on X, I forgot your handle. I'm sorry. I had it memorized and I forgot. What is it again?
It's just a shortcut of my name. It's Eurokral, Jurokral. So it's just my name shortened up a little bit.
Yeah, go and follow him. He's got some very interesting tweets, and like you said, it tickles the brain. So I enjoy it. Thank you so much for coming on again. Anything else you'd like to mention out there before we cut it off?
Honestly, let's enjoy the next 5 to 6 days. It's gonna be so much fun, and hopefully it will tickle all of our brains in a positive way. What Jim Neal and his team is gonna do. So hopefully it is something good, and I hope it's something smart. So I'll leave it that.
Well, thank you again, Juraj, for coming on. We're gonna have another episode with David Castillo of D Magazine. He's gonna come on and talk with us as well, and lots of content coming out here from the Starcastic Remarks guys here. But along with Juraj, my name's Ryan. We'll catch you guys on the flip side, and we hope you guys have a good, fantastic morning, afternoon, evening, whenever you guys are listening. And we will be back with you guys again very, very shortly. Go Stars.